The rain fell in a fine silver mist, blurring the city lights into a watercolor wash of neon and gold. Inside the hushed interior of the black sedan, the only sound was the rhythmic sweep of the windshield wipers and the low, condescending murmur of Veronica Croft's voice. Ethan kept his eyes on the road, his hands resting lightly on the leather-wrapped steering wheel. He was a man accustomed to stillness, to observing the world from a place of quiet control. Tonight, that stillness was a shield. "Honestly, Amelia, I don't know how you do it," Veronica said, her voice dripping with the kind of pity that was sharper than any overt insult. She was seated directly behind Ethan, next to his wife. "It's one thing to be with a man who is finding his path. We all support that. But to have him chauffeuring us around on a Friday night, it's a bit much." Amelia shifted uncomfortably in the plush leather seat. "It's no problem, Ronnie." Ethan was free, he offered. Her voice was a little too bright, a little too defensive. In the rearview mirror, Ethan saw the faint blush coloring her cheeks. He saw the way she avoided meeting his eyes. "He offered," Marcus Thorne echoed from the passenger seat, his tone a lazy drawl of amusement. Marcus had the easy, unearned confidence of a man who had never been told no in his life. He adjusted his $1,000 tie and glanced at Ethan as if he were a piece of furniture. Very chivalrous, like a character from a bygone era. The loyal driver. "What is it you do again, Ethan? Consulting, right? Very vague." Ethan's gaze remained fixed on the slick, rain-swept asphalt. "I help companies solve structural problems," he replied, his voice even and calm. It was the truth, just not the one they were equipped to understand. They imagined him in a cramped cubicle, poring over spreadsheets for a mid-level firm. They couldn't conceive of the scale of the structures or the gravity of the problems. "Structural problems," Marcus repeated, a smirk playing on his lips. "Right. Well, when you're done with that, maybe you can solve the problem of this traffic." He gestured impatiently at the line of red taillights ahead. "I have a reservation at Perigee. If we're late, they'll give our table away. You know how it is." Ethan knew precisely how it was at Perigee. He knew the chef Jean-Pierre personally. He knew the maitre d', a formidable woman named Isabel, would hold a table for him indefinitely, even if he arrived an hour after closing. He knew this because his company, Vance Global, had built the skyscraper the restaurant was in. He owned the building. But he said none of this. He simply nodded. "I'll find a faster route." He executed a flawless turn, his movements economical and precise, and merged onto a side street. The car, a custom-built sedan that looked deceptively modest, but housed a powerful, silent electric engine and military-grade security features, handled the wet cobblestones with unnerving grace. Veronica sighed dramatically. "I just worry about you, Amelia. You have so much potential. You shouldn't be settling." The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Settling for Ethan. Settling for a life of quiet obscurity, driven around in a nice but not ostentatious car by a husband who was little more than a polite, vaguely employed servant. Ethan felt Amelia flinch beside him. He felt her shame as if it were his own. It was a familiar ache, one he had been cataloging for months. Every condescending remark from her friends, every time she failed to defend him, every pained, apologetic glance she sent his way when she thought he wasn't looking, he collected them all. He stored them not with anger, but with a kind of sorrowful precision. They were data points in a complex, heartbreaking equation. He had met Amelia in a university library 5 years ago. He'd been taking a personal sabbatical, auditing postgraduate courses in urban planning and architectural theory under an assumed name. She was a brilliant, ambitious art history student, writing her thesis on the socio-political impact of brutalist architecture. He had been captivated by the fire in her mind, her passion, her laughter. She had been charmed by his quiet intelligence, his gentle nature, and his seeming indifference to the frantic status chasing that defined her social circle. He had presented himself as a freelance consultant, a man of modest means but rich intellectual curiosity, and she had fallen in love with that man. But over time, the corrosive influence of her friends, Veronica and Marcus in particular, had begun to eat away at her confidence. They saw the world as a rigid hierarchy of wealth and status, and in their eyes, Ethan was near the bottom. He didn't have a flashy title. He didn't wear designer labels. He didn't talk about stock portfolios or vacation homes in Aspen. And so, slowly, insidiously, Amelia had started to see him through their judgmental eyes. The man she had admired for his substance became a source of social anxiety. Her love for him was still there, a deep and genuine current, but it was now tangled with shame. "We're almost there," Ethan said, his voice cutting cleanly through the tension. He pulled up to the curb in front of the glittering facade of Perigee. A valet in a sharp red coat rushed forward, umbrella in hand. Marcus grunted, already unclipping his seatbelt. "Finally, don't wander too far, Ethan. We'll probably only be a couple of hours." He didn't ask, he commanded. He tossed the words over his shoulder as he got out of the car, not even bothering to make eye contact. Veronica paused at her door, which the valet was holding open. She looked at Ethan, her expression a perfect mask of magnanimity. "Amelia, give him some money for a coffee or something. It's the least we can do." Before Amelia could even react, mortification warring with her ingrained desire to appease, Ethan gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. He looked at his wife, his eyes holding hers for a brief, intense moment. It was a look that said, "Not now. It's all right." Amelia's shoulders slumped. She gave him a weak, miserable smile and followed Veronica into the restaurant, swallowed by the warm, golden light of the lobby. Ethan watched them go. He didn't get out of the car. The valet, a young man named Leo, looked at him with a confused expression. "Sir, are you not joining them?" Ethan offered a small, sad smile. "Not tonight, Leo. I'm just the driver." The valet hesitated, then nodded and backed away, leaving Ethan alone in the silence of the car. He reached into his pocket, his fingers closing around a cool, smooth piece of metal. It was a key fob, simple, silver, unadorned. It bore no logo. It looked like it could belong to any car. But it was the master key. It could start this vehicle. It could grant him access to the penthouse of the very building in front of him. It could open the doors to boardrooms and private airfields and construction sites that spanned continents. It was the key to a $44 billion empire resting silently in the palm of the man they had just dismissed as a servant. He closed his hand around it, the cold metal of familiar comfort. He was a patient man, and he knew that all structures, no matter how imposing, had a breaking point. This story we're diving into today is all about what lies beneath the surface. It's a story about dignity, respect, and the moment a patient man decides he has been patient long enough. We're so glad you're here with us for it. If you enjoy stories about the underdog finally getting their moment, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. And hey, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now let's get back to Ethan, waiting in the rain, as the first seeds of a storm he would personally unleash began to take root. 2 hours stretched into 3, then 4. The fine mist of the early evening had thickened into a steady, percussive downpour that drummed against the roof of the sedan. Ethan didn't move. He didn't turn on the radio or scroll through his phone. He simply sat in the driver's seat, the city's shimmering, distorted lights painting fleeting patterns across his still features. He was thinking. He was planning. The process was not emotional. It was architectural. He was examining the foundations of his marriage, the load-bearing walls of trust, and the hairline fractures of shame and neglect that threatened the entire structure. He thought back to their first date, a walk through the city's botanical garden. They had debated the merits of postmodernism versus parametricism for 3 straight hours, forgetting to eat, forgetting the time. He had loved her mind. He had loved the way her eyes lit up when she was dissecting an idea she was passionate about. Back then she had seen him, the man, not the facade. He hadn't needed a title or a tailored suit. He had been enough. When had that changed? It wasn't a single event. It was a slow erosion. It began with little comments after they attended parties with her friends. Marcus was asking what firm you consult for. I wasn't sure what to say. Then it became suggestions. Maybe you could get a new watch? Just something a little more substantial. And finally, it had culminated in this. Her silent complicity as her friends treated him with open disdain. Her fear of their judgment had become more powerful than her loyalty to him. A vibration in his pocket pulled him from his reverie. He glanced at the screen of his phone. It was a secure message from David Chen, his chief operating officer, and one of the few people on Earth who knew the full scope of both his personal and professional lives. The message was concise. Project Nightingale is greenlit. Final approval signed by the International Board 10 minutes ago. Your personal sign-off is the last step. They are waiting. Project Nightingale was a decade in the making. It was a multi-billion-dollar philanthropic initiative to design and build a network of state-of-the-art pediatric hospitals in underserved regions across the globe. It was, in many ways, his life's work, the ultimate expression of his belief that good design could save lives. It was the reason he had amassed his fortune in the first place. He tapped a reply, his thumb moving with practiced efficiency. Proceed. Authorize fund transfer. Inform the board I will address them personally at the Airy Gala. Another message came instantly. Understood. They will be thrilled. Are you all right, Ethan? Your location indicates you haven't moved in 4 hours. David's concern was genuine. He was more than an employee, he was a friend. Ethan typed back. I'm fine, David. Just attending to a small personal matter, a structural issue. He pocketed the phone. At that exact moment, the doors of Perigee swung open, and his passengers emerged. They were laughing, flushed with wine and self-satisfaction. Marcus was clapping a hand on Amelia's shoulder, while Veronica was scanning the street, her expression one of regal impatience. Her eyes found the sedan, and she gestured sharply, a flick of the wrist that was both a summons and a dismissal. Amelia saw him and hurried toward the car, her steps quick and unsteady in her heels. She opened the passenger door herself and slid in, bringing a gust of cold, rain-scented air and the faint, expensive perfume of the restaurant with her. Ethan, I am so sorry, she whispered, her voice thick with a mixture of alcohol and guilt. They got to talking and we lost track of time. Marcus insisted on another bottle of wine. It's all right, Amelia, he said, his voice betraying no hint of his long wait. Marcus and Veronica piled into the back. Took you long enough to see us, Marcus grumbled, shaking rainwater from his coat. I was about to call an Uber. Honestly, the service tonight is just subpar. Ethan put the car in gear. He didn't look at Marcus. He didn't need to. He could feel the man's smug, wine-fueled arrogance radiating from the back seat. Oh, lighten up, Marcus, Veronica chirped. At least the ride is free. Think of him as our own personal rideshare app. One with a very limited service area, of course. She laughed, a high, tinkling sound that grated on Ethan's nerves. This time something in Amelia snapped. That's enough, Ronnie, she said, her voice quiet but firm. He's my husband. Veronica fell silent, momentarily stunned. Then she let out a theatrical gasp. Oh, darling, don't be so sensitive. It's just a joke. Ethan knows we're just kidding, don't you, Ethan? Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror. His eyes met Veronica's. For a fleeting second, the placid, patient mask dropped, and she saw something else in his gaze, something ancient and unyielding, like bedrock. It wasn't anger, it was weight, the kind of weight that holds up skyscrapers. She looked away, a flicker of unease crossing her features for the first time that night. I'm tired, Amelia said, turning to face the front. I just want to go home. The rest of the ride was silent, but it was a new kind of silence. The lazy, comfortable silence of their superiority had been replaced by a tense, awkward quiet. A line had been crossed. A hairline fracture had just widened. Ethan drove on, his expression unchanged, but inside a decision had been made. The period of quiet observation was over. The time for demolition and reconstruction was about to begin. He knew with the certainty of an architect reading a blueprint that the structure of their lives was about to be redesigned from the ground up, and he would be the one to do it. A week later, the subject of the Airy Gala arose. It was the social event of the season, a black tie fundraiser for the Vance Foundation's new pediatric health initiative, Project Nightingale. The location was a closely guarded secret, but invitations were the most sought-after commodity in their circle. Veronica had, through sheer force of will and a dozen pleading phone calls, secured 3 tickets. She brought it up over brunch at a chic, sun-drenched cafe. "It's going to be absolutely divine," she gushed, waving her invitation like a trophy. "It's at a private mountain estate called The Airy. No one's ever been there. It's owned by the Vance of Vance Global himself. You know, the construction magnate. He's a complete recluse, apparently. Terribly mysterious. This gala is his big coming out party, so to speak." Marcus nodded, looking impressed. "I've been trying to get a meeting with Vance Global for months. Their new waterfront development is a game changer. The deal I'm working on now would be small potatoes compared to getting in with them." He looked at Veronica. "Good work securing these." Amelia listened, a familiar pang of anxiety in her chest. The world they were talking about, of magnates and galas and waterfront developments, felt a million miles away from her quiet life with Ethan. Then Veronica turned to her eyes gleaming with a familiar, manipulative light. "The only problem," she began, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on the table, "is the logistics. It's a 4-hour drive up into the mountains, and we'll all want to have a few glasses of champagne, naturally. It would be such a hassle to hire a car and driver for the weekend." She let the sentence hang in the air. The unspoken request was as clear as the crystal glass of water on the table. Amelia felt a cold dread creep up her spine. After the incident last week, she had sworn to herself she wouldn't let it happen again. She had promised herself she would stand up for Ethan. "We could just drive ourselves," Amelia said weakly. "Maybe stay overnight nearby." Veronica waved a dismissive hand. "Don't be silly. The hotels are all booked. And who wants to be the designated driver for an event like this? It's just—" She looked at Amelia, her expression softening into one of faux concern. "I know things are a bit tight for you and Ethan right now. We thought, well, we'd be happy to cover his costs, of course, for gas and his time. Think of it as a little weekend job for him. It would be a huge help to us, and he'd be getting paid." The offer was a masterpiece of condescension, wrapped in the guise of friendly assistance. It framed Ethan not as a husband doing a favor, but as an employee for hire. It was a test, and Amelia knew she was failing it. She looked at Veronica's expectant face, at Marcus's indifferent shrug, and her courage crumbled. The fear of their disapproval, of being ostracized, was a gravitational pull she couldn't seem to escape. I can ask him," she mumbled, hating the weakness in her own voice. That evening, she broached the subject with Ethan. She tried to frame it as a fun weekend getaway, a chance to see the mountains, but the words came out stilted and dishonest. He was in his small home office, a room filled with more books than furniture, sketching in a notebook. He listened patiently, his pen never ceasing its fluid movement across the page. "And they said they would pay for your time and everything," she finished, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Ethan stopped sketching. He placed his pen down carefully, creating a perfect parallel line with the edge of his notebook. He looked up at her, and his face was calm, his eyes clear. There was no anger, no disappointment. There was only a quiet, unnerving stillness. "You want me to be their driver for the weekend?" he stated. It wasn't a question. "No, I mean, yes, but it's not like that," she stammered, twisting her hands together. "It's just a long drive and—" "I understand," he said, cutting through her flustered explanation. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening street. For a long moment, he was silent. Amelia's heart hammered in her chest, bracing for the argument, for the hurt refusal. Then he turned back to her, a small, unreadable smile on his face. "All right," he said, "I'll do it." Amelia stared at him, stunned. "Really?" "Of course," he said. "It sounds like it's important to you." He walked over to her and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was as gentle as ever, but she felt a sudden, inexplicable chill. It felt like the touch of a stranger. "Don't worry about it, Amelia. I'm happy to help your friends." She felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost made her dizzy. He wasn't angry. It was going to be fine. "Thank you, Ethan," she whispered, hugging him tightly. "You're the best." Over her shoulder, Ethan's eyes were open, still fixed on the world outside the window. His expression remained serene, but a decision had solidified within him. He would drive them. He would play the part they had assigned him one last time. He would be their humble chauffeur, their quiet servant. He would ferry them to the most exclusive event of the year, to a place no one had ever seen. He would drive them to the heart of his own empire. He would deliver them to their judgment. Later that night, long after Amelia had fallen into a relieved, untroubled sleep, Ethan sat in his office. The room was dark, save for the cool glow of a large monitor on his desk. On the screen was not a spreadsheet or a consulting report, but a complex, multi-layered architectural rendering. It was a stunning building of glass and steel and stone, a structure that seemed to grow organically from the cliffside of a mountain. The Eyrie, his home. He clicked a button, and the rendering shifted to a live security feed. He saw the preparations for the gala in full swing. He saw the catering trucks arriving, the lighting crews testing massive spotlights, the valets rehearsing their choreographed movements. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. A small window popped up on his screen. It was a video call from David Chen. David's face was etched with concern. "Ethan, I just saw the updated guest manifest. You added Veronica Croft and Marcus Thorne. Are you sure about this? After what you told me?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, his face half in shadow, half in the cool light of the screen. "I'm sure, David," he said, his voice low and steady. "They're arriving with my wife." David was silent for a moment. He was one of the few people who understood the delicate game Ethan was playing, the deep personal reasons behind his years of self-imposed anonymity. "This isn't just about the gala, is it?" "No," Ethan admitted. "This is a structural test. I need to see if the foundation is sound." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out the simple, silver key fob. He held it up to the camera. "Make sure Mr. Harrison at the main gate knows I'll be arriving personally, in the black sedan. He'll know the one." "And the guests with you?" David asked. A slow, cold smile touched Ethan's lips. It was a smile that promised not warmth, but a terrible, absolute clarity. "They won't have an invitation. Tell Harrison to expect them, but to treat them as unexpected arrivals." "Understood," David said, his expression grim. He knew what that meant. He knew the meticulous, unassailable protocols of a place like the Eyrie. To arrive without an invitation was not a minor social blunder. It was an impossibility. The system was not designed to accommodate it. "One more thing, David," Ethan said, his eyes fixed on the image of the magnificent structure on his screen. "The deal Marcus Thorne is so proud of, the one with Sterling REIT, I own Sterling REIT. It's one of our smaller real estate investment trusts. I want you to call their board first thing in the morning. Tell them the financing for Thorne's project has been reevaluated. Put it on indefinite hold effective immediately. "Consider it done," David said without hesitation. "Thank you, David. I'll see you at the top of the mountain." Ethan ended the call, plunging the room back into darkness. He sat there for a long time, the silver key fob cool and heavy in his hand. He was not a man given to anger. He was a builder. He believed in careful planning, strong materials, and flawless execution. And he was about to execute the most important project of his life. The day of the gala arrived, bright and clear. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. Ethan had meticulously prepared the sedan, cleaning it until the black paint held a mirror-like sheen. He wore a simple, well-tailored dark suit, the kind of anonymous uniform that could belong to a driver, a security guard, or a CEO. The ambiguity was intentional. When he pulled up to Veronica and Marcus's upscale apartment building, they were waiting outside, preening in their designer attire. Marcus wore a tuxedo that was just a little too flashy, a silk pocket square fanning out ostentatiously. Veronica was draped in a glittering, sequin gown, a fur stole wrapped around her shoulders despite the mild weather. "Right on time," Marcus said, not as a compliment, but as an observation of a servant's punctuality. He opened the back door for Veronica and then slid in beside her, leaving the front passenger seat for Amelia. He didn't offer to help with their garment bags, which Ethan quietly retrieved from the curb and placed carefully in the trunk. Amelia got in, giving Ethan a quick, nervous smile. She looked beautiful in a simple, elegant navy dress, but her eyes were clouded with anxiety. She was already dreading the hours ahead. The drive began. For the first hour, as they navigated the city's arteries and merged onto the highway leading towards the mountains, the conversation was light. But as the urban landscape gave way to rolling hills, and then to the first glimpses of the towering peaks ahead, the familiar dynamic reasserted itself. "I heard the catering is by Chef Antoine Dubois," Veronica said, scrolling through her phone. "His restaurant has 3 Michelin stars. The budget for this event must be astronomical." Marcus grunted in agreement. "Vance is a ghost, but he doesn't do things by half measures. The waterfront project is budgeted at $6 billion. This party is probably a rounding error for him." He leaned forward, his voice taking on a conspiratorial tone. "My sources say he's going to announce a major global expansion tonight. That's why I need to get some face time. A man like Vance, an introduction can change your life." He looked at Ethan's reflection in the rearview mirror. "Isn't that right, Ethan? You must dream of getting a break like that. One lucky meeting." "I'm not much for parties," Ethan said calmly, his eyes on the winding mountain road. "Of course you're not," Marcus scoffed, leaning back again. "They're not for you. They're for people who make things happen. No offense." "None taken," Ethan replied, his voice a placid lake. But beneath the surface, he was taking careful notes. The list of grievances, he thought with a strange, detached sense of irony, it was growing longer. Veronica chimed in, her voice laced with her signature brand of helpful cruelty. "Amelia, darling, you really must encourage him to be more ambitious. A man needs ambition. It's what separates the winners from from the drivers." She patted Amelia's shoulder. "I'm only saying it because I care." Amelia shrank in her seat, her face pale. She opened her mouth to say something, a protest, a defense, anything, but the words wouldn't come. She looked at Ethan's profile. He was so calm, so unaffected. Maybe it didn't bother him. Maybe she was the only one who felt this excruciating humiliation. She fell silent, and the silence was a confession of her defeat. Ethan saw it all. He felt the weight of her silence more keenly than any of their insults. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white for a fraction of a second, before he consciously relaxed them. Patience. It was a virtue, but it was also a weapon. His strategy relied on their absolute, unwavering confidence in his insignificance. He had to let them build their cage of arrogance around themselves, bar by bar. He had to let them believe they were in control, right up until the moment he revealed that he had built the cage and he held the only key. The road grew steeper, the turns sharper. The air became crisp and cool. They were climbing high into the mountains, leaving the ordinary world far below. The landscape was breathtaking, a panorama of ancient forests and granite cliffs under the vast, open sky. But no one in the car seemed to notice its beauty. They were too absorbed in their own small, gilded world. "Are we almost there?" Marcus asked, his voice betraying a hint of impatience for the first time. "My phone has lost its signal." "We lose signal about 10 miles out," Ethan said. "The estate has its own secure network. We're 5 minutes away." "How would you know that?" Veronica asked, her brow furrowed. "I read the instructions that came with the invitation," Ethan lied smoothly. Ahead, the road curved one last time, and then they saw it. It wasn't a gate, it was a statement. Two massive, unadorned monoliths of black granite flanked the road, with a sleek, carbon fiber barrier between them. A small, discreet guardhouse was nestled to one side, its dark-tinted windows revealing nothing. It looked less like the entrance to an estate and more like the checkpoint for a top-secret research facility. "Impressive," Marcus murmured, a note of genuine awe in his voice. Ethan slowed the car and pulled up to the barrier. A man in a severe, dark gray suit stepped out of the guardhouse. He was tall and impeccably dressed, with an air of quiet, absolute authority. This was Mr. Harrison, the estate's general manager and head of security. Harrison walked not to the passenger window, but directly to the driver's side. He ignored the three other occupants of the car completely. He leaned down slightly, his expression unreadable. Ethan pressed a button, and the window glided down silently. "Mr. Harrison," Ethan said, his voice quiet. "Mr. Vance," Harrison replied, his own voice a low, respectful baritone. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible bow of his head. "Welcome home. We trust your journey was pleasant." The words dropped into the shocked silence of the car like stones into a perfectly still pond. Home. Mr. Vance. Amelia, Marcus, and Veronica all froze. A collective, silent gasp seemed to suck the air out of the vehicle. Marcus's jaw went slack, his confident smirk vanishing as if wiped clean. Veronica's eyes widened, the color draining from her face, leaving her makeup looking like a garish mask. And Amelia just stared. She looked from the deferential Mr. Harrison to her husband, the man she thought she knew, the man she had allowed to be humiliated for hours. Her mind reeled, unable to process the impossible scene unfolding before her. "Mr. Vance?" Marcus stammered, his voice a choked whisper. He looked at Ethan, then back at Harrison, as if trying to solve an impossible puzzle. "There must be some mistake. This is Ethan, Amelia's husband." Mr. Harrison's gaze flickered to Marcus for the first time, and it was with an expression of pure, unadulterated ice. It was the look a king might give to a particularly bothersome insect. He did not deign to reply. His attention returned immediately to Ethan. "Shall I have the guest's vehicle brought around for them, sir?" Harrison asked, his phrasing precise and devastating. Their vehicle, as if they had arrived separately and were now an inconvenience to be managed. Ethan held up a hand. "Not just yet, Mr. Harrison. They'll be with me for a little longer." He turned his head slightly, his eyes finding Marcus's in the rearview mirror. "There's no mistake, Marcus." The barrier in front of them retracted silently, sinking into the ground. The road ahead was clear. Ethan's gaze shifted to Veronica, who was staring at him, her mouth opening and closing silently like a fish. "You were curious about the owner of this place, Veronica, the terribly mysterious recluse." He then looked at his wife. Amelia's face was a canvas of shock, shame, and a terrifying, dawning comprehension. Her eyes were wide with a million unspoken questions. He saw the memory of every insult, every condescending remark, every moment of her silent complicity flash across her face. Just then, a second vehicle, a sleek electric golf cart, pulled up beside them. A man in an equally sharp suit hopped out. It was David Chen, Ethan's COO. He walked up to the driver's side, his face breaking into a warm, genuine smile. "Ethan, glad you made it," David said, his voice carrying easily into the car. "The mayor is here already. He's eager to talk to you about the city's endorsement for Phase 2 of the Nightingale Initiative." He nodded respectfully towards the back of the car, though his eyes didn't truly register them. "Ma'am, sir." Then his focus returned to Ethan. "The final walkthrough for the foundation launch is ready whenever you are." The mayor. Phase 2. The foundation launch. The words were like hammer blows, each one demolishing another pillar of their reality. Ethan put the car into gear and began to drive slowly through the gates, onto the private, winding road that led up to the main house. The world of Veronica Croft and Marcus Thorne had been built on a foundation of names, connections, and perceived power. In the space of 30 seconds, that foundation had turned to dust. "Vance?" Amelia finally whispered, her voice trembling. "As in, Vance Global?" Ethan didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the road. The magnificent structure of the Eyrie was now visible in the distance, its glass walls catching the late afternoon sun like a multifaceted diamond. "Yes, Amelia," he said, his voice devoid of triumph, filled only with a profound, weary sadness. "As in Vance Global." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the simple, silver key fob. He held it up in the space between the front seats, where they could all see it. "I am the Vance of Vance Global. I own this mountain. I built the tower your office is in, Marcus. The restaurant you dined at last week is on the 81st floor of a building I own. And the bank that holds the financing for that big deal you were so desperate to close? That's my bank." He let the words settle. The silence in the car was no longer awkward. It was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum. He finally turned his head and looked at his wife, his eyes locking with hers. "Welcome to my home, Amelia." The Eyrie was even more stunning up close. It was less a house and more a work of habitable art, a symphony of glass, titanium, and locally sourced granite that seemed to float above the cliff edge. As Ethan pulled the sedan to a stop under a vast, cantilevered portico, a team of staff moved with silent efficiency. One opened Amelia's door, another opened the rear doors for Veronica and Marcus. But it was Mr. Harrison who personally opened the driver's side door for Ethan. "Sir," he said, with that same unwavering respect. Ethan stepped out of the car and into the crisp mountain air. He took a deep breath as if cleansing his lungs of the toxic atmosphere of the long drive. He was no longer Ethan, the humble consultant. He was Ethan Vance, and he was standing on his own ground. Veronica, Marcus, and Amelia stood frozen by the car, looking small and lost against the immense scale of the architecture. The army of staff, the other guests arriving in their own luxury vehicles, the palpable air of power and wealth. It was all overwhelming. Their carefully constructed social universe had been inverted. Veronica was the first to recover, her social instincts kicking in as a desperate survival mechanism. She plastered a brittle, dazzling smile on her face and rushed towards Ethan, her sequined dress shimmering. "Ethan! Oh my goodness, you sly dog!" she exclaimed, her voice a shrill imitation of playful affection. She looped her arm through his. "What a magnificent prank! You had us all completely fooled. A billionaire pretending to be a simple consultant? It's like a movie. You should have told us." Ethan gently but firmly disengaged his arm from her grasp. He looked at her, his expression not angry, but clinical, like a doctor examining a specimen. "A prank, Veronica?" he asked, his voice quiet but carrying with absolute clarity. "Was it a prank when you called my wife's husband her driver? Was it a prank when you suggested she give me money for a coffee while I waited for you in the rain for 4 hours? Tell me, which part was the joke? Veronica's smile faltered. The color drained from her face again. We were just teasing. It was all in good fun, you know that. Marcus, seeing Veronica's approach fail, tried a different tactic. He stepped forward, his face pale and sweating, attempting to project an air of masculine, businesslike reason. Ethan, Mr. Vance, listen, there's been a misunderstanding, a massive one on our part. We were completely out of line. I am profoundly embarrassed. He extended a hand. Let's put this behind us. In fact, this could be an opportunity. My firm has been trying to get a foot in the door with Vance Global for ages. We could be very valuable to each other. Ethan looked at Marcus's outstretched hand but made no move to take it. He let the man's hand hang there in the open air, a pathetic symbol of his desperation. Valuable? Ethan repeated the word as if it were a foreign object. You spent the last 4 hours explaining to me, in detail, why I was worthless. You defined a man's value by his ambition, his title, and the parties he attends. By your own metrics, Marcus, I should be of no value to you at all. He then delivered the final crushing blow, his voice remaining level, almost conversational. As for your deal with Sterling REIT, I received a call about that this morning. The board has decided to put your financing on indefinite hold. It seems they have concerns about the project's leadership. He paused, letting the implication sink in. I agreed with their assessment. Marcus's hand dropped to his side. His face went ashen. He understood. It wasn't a coincidence. This was a consequence. His career, his reputation, the deal he had built his entire year around, it had all just been erased with a few quiet words. He staggered back a step, looking at Ethan with a new emotion, fear. Ethan's attention then shifted, leaving the two of them standing there like statues of broken pride. He turned to face his wife. Amelia hadn't moved. She hadn't spoken. She just watched, her face a mask of horrified realization. The man she loved, the man she had pitied, the man she had failed to defend, was one of the most powerful men in the country, and she had treated him like a burden. The shame was so profound it was physical, a crushing weight on her chest that made it hard to breathe. Ethan walked slowly towards her, his footsteps echoing softly on the polished stone. The chattering guests, the bustling staff, everything faded into the background. There were only the two of them, standing at the precipice of their broken marriage. He stopped in front of her. His face was not hard or cruel. It was etched with a sorrow that was far more devastating than any anger could ever be. The entire way here, he said, his voice so soft that only she could hear it, a quiet bomb in the wreckage of her world. You sat there, you listened to them, and you said nothing. He wasn't shouting, he didn't need to. The quiet, simple truth of his words was an indictment more powerful than any accusation. Not once. He didn't wait for a reply. He simply turned and walked into the magnificent building that was his home, leaving her standing alone in the shadow of his empire, with the ruins of their life at her feet. Mr. Harrison materialized at Ethan's side as he entered the vast, cathedral-like great hall of the Eyrie. The space was filled with elegantly dressed guests, their conversations a low, pleasant hum under the soaring ceilings. The air buzzed with power and influence. Sir, Harrison said in a low voice, what are your instructions regarding Miss Croft and Mr. Thorne? Ethan paused, looking out through the floor-to-ceiling glass walls at the panoramic view of the mountains, now bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. He didn't look back. Their invitation to this event has been rescinded. Their presence here is a security concern. His voice was cold and precise. Arrange for a taxi to take them back to the city. Now. And Mrs. Vance? Harrison asked, his tone careful. Ethan's shoulders tensed for a fraction of a second. He was silent for a long moment. Show my wife to the master suite. See that she has whatever she needs. but inform the staff that she is not to be disturbed, and I am not to be disturbed either." "Understood, sir." Harrison bowed his head and moved away with silent, lethal efficiency. Outside, the consequences were being delivered with polite, surgical precision. Another staff member approached Veronica and Marcus. "Miss Croft, Mr. Thorne," the young man said, his voice pleasant but firm. "We have been informed that there has been a mistake with your invitations. A car has been arranged to take you back to the city. It will be here momentarily. Please wait here." The dismissal was absolute. There was no room for argument. They were being ejected. The public nature of the humiliation was the most exquisite part of the punishment. Several other guests, powerful figures in their own right who knew Marcus and Veronica, had witnessed the entire exchange. They now looked away, conversations starting up with a sudden urgency, a clear signal of social excommunication. The word would be all over the city by morning. Marcus Thorne and Veronica Croft were out. Veronica's face, already pale, turned a blotchy, furious red. "This is ridiculous. I am not leaving. I know people here," she hissed, her voice a desperate, ugly rasp. The staff member's pleasant expression didn't waver. "As you wish. However, you will have to wait outside the property line. The taxi will meet you at the main road." He gestured vaguely towards the granite gates, a mile down the winding drive. The reality of their situation crashed down on them. They had no car. They had no signal on their phones. They were stranded, hours from home, at the mercy of the man they had spent the day insulting. Marcus, utterly broken, simply nodded. He knew a checkmate when he saw one. He grabbed Veronica's arm. "Let's go, Ronnie. It's over." He pulled her away from the grand entrance, a man walking toward his own professional execution. Their retreat was a spectacle of complete and total defeat. Meanwhile, Mr. Harrison approached Amelia. His demeanor towards her was correct, professional, but devoid of the warmth he showed his employer. "Mrs. Vance," he said formally, "Mr. Vance has asked that I show you to your suite. Please, come this way." Amelia followed him numbly, feeling the eyes of the other guests on her. Were they looking at her with pity? With curiosity? She couldn't tell. She felt like a ghost, trailing in the wake of a life that was no longer hers. Harrison led her through a private wing of the estate, down a quiet, art-filled corridor, and opened a set of large double doors. The suite was breathtaking. It wasn't just a room, it was an entire apartment, larger than her and Ethan's whole house. One wall was a seamless pane of glass that offered a staggering view of the valley below. The furnishings were elegant and understated, a testament to exquisite taste and limitless wealth. A fire crackled in a minimalist hearth. On a low table, a bottle of champagne was chilling in a silver bucket next to a vase of perfect white orchids. It should have been a paradise. To Amelia, it felt like the most beautiful prison in the world. "If you require anything, ma'am, simply use the house tablet," Harrison said, gesturing to a sleek device on a nearby console. "Dinner, a change of clothes, anything at all." He then paused, his professional mask slipping for just a second, revealing a hint of human judgment. "Mr. Vance will be occupied with the gala for the remainder of the evening." He closed the doors, the click of the latch echoing in the cavernous silence. Amelia was alone. She walked on trembling legs to the center of the room and slowly sank onto the edge of a plush sofa. She looked around at the incredible luxury, the evidence of a life her husband had kept completely hidden from her. The wealth, the power, the secrecy, it was all staggering. But that wasn't what brought the first sob tearing from her throat. It wasn't the lie of his identity that broke her. It was the truth of her own failure. She thought of his quiet patience in the car, the way he absorbed their friend's casual cruelty without a word, the way he had looked at her in the rearview mirror, his eyes not angry, but sad. He hadn't been waiting for the right moment to reveal his power. He had been waiting for her. He had been waiting for his wife to stand up for him. He had been giving her chance after chance to show him that she valued him, the man, regardless of his status or profession. And she had failed. Every single time. The humiliation she felt now was 1,000 times worse than anything her friends had ever made her feel. This was not the shallow embarrassment of not fitting in. This was the profound, soul-crushing shame of knowing you have betrayed the one person you were supposed to love and protect. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable, for the man she had wronged and the love she had so carelessly damaged. Hours passed. The sky outside the glass wall turned from fiery orange to deep indigo, then to a black canvas sprinkled with a billion stars. The distant, muffled sounds of the gala, a swell of music, a burst of applause, eventually faded away. The great house fell silent. Amelia didn't move from the sofa. She had cried until she had no tears left, leaving her hollowed out, empty. Sometime after midnight, the doors to the suite opened silently. Ethan stepped inside. He had removed his suit jacket and tie, and his sleeves were rolled up to his forearms. He looked tired, the immense strain of the day and night showing in the lines around his eyes. He didn't look at her immediately. He walked over to the vast window and stood there, his back to her, gazing out at the starlit valley. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy with unspoken words. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, the real confrontation. Finally he spoke, his voice low and weary. "Why, Amelia?" It was the same question he had asked before, but now, in the stillness of the night, it held the weight of a final judgment. It wasn't about the secret. He wasn't asking why she hadn't guessed he was a billionaire. The question was simpler and far more painful. "Why did you let them treat me like that?" he continued, his voice still directed at the window. "Why did you let them treat your husband like a servant in your own presence? I don't care about Marcus or Veronica. They are who they are. Their opinion of me is meaningless. But you are my wife. Your opinion is the only one that has ever mattered." He turned around to face her. His eyes were not filled with the fire of anger, but with the cold ashes of disappointment. "I can understand being embarrassed by a husband you think is an unsuccessful consultant. I can understand being swayed by your friend's obsession with wealth and status. I can even, barely, understand your silence. But what I cannot understand," he said, taking a step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "is how you could sit there, watch them humiliate the man you claim to love, and do nothing. Not a word, not a look, nothing." Amelia finally found her voice, a ragged, broken sound. "I was a coward," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes again. "I was so afraid of what they would think of me, of being left out. It was pathetic, and it was weak, and I know that." "Afraid of being judged by people like that?" Ethan asked, a note of disbelief in his voice. "People whose entire sense of self-worth is based on what they own and who they know? That's the world you valued more than my dignity?" "No," she cried, standing up, desperate to make him understand. "I love you, Ethan. I fell in love with you. The you I met in the library. The man who could talk about books and art and ideas for hours. I never cared about money." "Didn't you?" he challenged, his voice cutting like glass. "When was the last time we had one of those conversations? Lately, it's only been about what Marcus thinks, or where Veronica is vacationing, or why I don't have a better watch. You say you fell in love with that man, but you spent the last year being ashamed of him. You let your friends chip away at his worth, and you handed them the chisel." Every word was the truth, and every word was a stake in her heart. She couldn't deny it. She couldn't defend herself. She could only stand there and accept the verdict. "I kept my identity a secret for a reason, Amelia," he said, his voice softening slightly, the weariness returning. "My family has enormous wealth. I grew up watching it corrupt people, watching them become suspicious and isolated, never knowing if someone loved them for who they were or for what they had. When my father passed, I inherited everything. I could have stepped into that life immediately, but I didn't want it. I wanted something real. He walked over to the fireplace, resting a hand on the cool stone of the mantel. So I created Ethan, the simple consultant, a man with just enough to be comfortable, but not enough to be impressive. I wanted to see if I could find someone who would love that man, someone who saw value in things other than a bank balance. I truly thought I had found that person in you. He looked at her, and the pain in his eyes was so profound it stole her breath. The money, the company, all of this, he gestured around the magnificent room. This is just a circumstance of my life. It's not who I am. But you allowed them to convince you that my circumstance, or what you perceived it to be, was the full measure of my worth. A sob escaped her lips. I'm sorry, she wept, the words utterly inadequate. Ethan, I am so sorry. I was wrong. I was weak and I was a fool, and I broke your trust. Not because I found out you were rich, but because I wasn't strong enough to defend the man I thought was poor. She finally understood. The crime wasn't her ignorance of his wealth. The crime was her betrayal of his character. He watched her, his expression unreadable. He had built an empire of steel and stone, managed thousands of employees, and negotiated billion-dollar deals. He knew how to solve structural problems on a global scale, but he didn't know if this, the broken structure of their marriage, was something that could ever be repaired. The foundation of trust had been shattered, and he didn't know if he had the strength or the will to rebuild it. The days that followed were filled with a profound and echoing silence. Ethan was consumed by the business of his empire, attending a whirlwind of meetings that had been set in motion by the gala. He moved through his world of power and influence with the same quiet competence he had displayed as a humble consultant. He was polite, almost gentle, in his interactions with Amelia, but there was a chasm between them, a distance that felt as vast and uncrossable as the valley outside their window. Amelia was adrift in the gilded cage of the eyrie. The staff treated her with impeccable, impersonal courtesy, addressing her as Mrs. Vance, but she felt like an imposter. She spent her time walking the mountain trails, the crisp air a sharp contrast to the suffocating shame that filled her lungs. She read books from the estate's vast library, the same kinds of books on art and architecture they had once discussed for hours. Each page was a reminder of the man she had fallen in love with, and the wife she had failed to be. She didn't hear from Veronica or Marcus, but the fallout of that night was easy to piece together from the whispers of the staff and the financial news playing on the televisions in the common areas. Marcus Thorne's career was in freefall. The indefinite hold on his financing had become a final cancellation, and the public humiliation of being ejected from the gala had rendered him toxic. His firm had unceremoniously fired him. Veronica, a creature of social standing, had been effectively erased. Her name was dropped from guest lists. Her calls went unanswered. They had built their worlds on a perception of status, and Ethan had effortlessly demolished it. He had done it not with rage, but with a quiet, decisive flick of his wrist. One evening, a week after the gala, Amelia found Ethan in a part of the estate she hadn't seen before. It was a workshop, a massive, light-filled space filled with drafting tables, 3D printers, and scale models of incredible buildings. This was his sanctuary, his creative heart. He was standing over a large table, studying a detailed model of a futuristic, beautifully designed hospital. Project Nightingale. She stood in the doorway, hesitant to intrude. He didn't seem to notice her at first. His focus was so complete. He was tracing the lines of the model with his finger, a soft, almost tender expression on his face. This was the real Ethan Vance. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, but the builder. The man who dreamed of making the world a better place through structure and design. It's beautiful, she said softly. He looked up, his expression shifting to that familiar, polite neutrality. It's the first of the 12 hospitals, he explained, his voice even. This one is for a rural province in Vietnam. The design maximizes natural light and ventilation to reduce energy costs and promote healing. He spoke about it with the same passion she remembered from their first dates. She took a tentative step into the room. Can you tell me about it? He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. For the next hour, he walked her through the project, explaining the architectural challenges, the sustainable materials, the way the layout was designed to ease the stress on young patients and their families. As he spoke, the distance between them seemed to shrink, just for a moment. She saw the man she had first loved, the brilliant, passionate idealist. When he finished, she looked at him, her heart aching. "This is who you are," she whispered. "This is what you do. And I was ashamed because you didn't have a fancy job title." The absurdity of it, the sheer idiotic blindness, hit her with fresh force. "I am so sorry, Ethan," she said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I know I've said it before, and I know words aren't enough, but I need you to know that my apology isn't for finding out you're rich. I'm not trying to get back in your good graces now that I know you're powerful. I am sorry for my weakness. I am sorry I was not the partner you deserved, long before I ever knew any of this existed. I betrayed the man I married, and it doesn't matter if he was a consultant or a king. I betrayed you." She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I don't expect you to forgive me. Maybe you can't. But I can't stay here like this, in this beautiful house that feels like a monument to my failure. If our marriage is over, I will accept that. I'll leave. I won't ask for a thing. All I ask is that someday you might believe that I loved you for exactly who I thought you were." She turned to leave, her heart breaking with the finality of it. "Amelia, wait!" His voice stopped her. She turned back. He was looking at her, and for the first time in a week, the polite mask was gone. His eyes were filled with a deep, conflicting turmoil of pain and something else. Something that might have been a flicker of hope. "I never wanted this power to be a test for our marriage," he said quietly, "but it became one. And we failed. I failed you by hiding such a huge part of my life. I created a situation where you couldn't possibly understand the context of your friend's world versus ours. I built a lie, and you got lost in it." "You didn't fail, Ethan," she insisted. "You were trying to find something real. I was the one who failed to see it, even when it was right in front of me." He walked towards her, closing the distance between them until he was standing just a few feet away. "A structure isn't just about its foundation," he said, his voice thoughtful, as if working through a complex design problem. "It's about its ability to withstand stress, to bend without breaking. When a structure fails, you don't always have to demolish it. Sometimes you can reinforce it. You can repair the cracks, strengthen the supports, and make it stronger than it was before." He looked directly into her eyes. "I don't know if that's possible for us. The damage is severe. But when I heard you say you would leave, that you wouldn't ask for anything, it was the first time in a long time I believed you saw me again, and not my wallet." He reached out, his hand hovering in the air for a moment before he gently touched her cheek. His touch was warm, real. "I don't have an answer, Amelia. I'm hurt, and the trust between us is broken. But I'm willing to see if we can rebuild. Not what we had, something new, something stronger, something honest." Tears streamed down her face, but for the first time in a week, they were tears of hope. "I will spend the rest of my life earning back your trust, Ethan," she whispered, "if you give me the chance." He didn't smile, but the profound sadness in his eyes lessened, replaced by a quiet resolve. "The first step," he said, "is to leave this mountain. This place is my work. It's not our home." He took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers. "Let's go home, Amelia, and let's start over." 6 months later, the crisp autumn air rustled the leaves of the maple trees, painting the landscape in hues of fire and gold. The house was not a mountain fortress or a city penthouse. It was a modest, beautiful home, designed by Ethan, with clean lines, warm wooden interiors, and large windows that flooded every room with natural light. It was nestled in a quiet, wooded suburb, a place of peaceful anonymity. In the backyard, a garden flourished with late-season vegetables and herbs. Amelia was on her knees, her hands in the rich soil, carefully tending to a patch of rosemary. She wore old jeans and a faded sweatshirt, a smudge of dirt on her cheek. She looked more at peace, more genuinely happy than she ever had in her designer dresses. The back door slid open, and Ethan came out, carrying 2 mugs of steaming coffee. He had traded his bespoke suits for a simple Henley and work pants. He handed a mug to Amelia, his fingers brushing against hers. The simple, everyday intimacy that had been lost was slowly, carefully returning. "The new director for the Foundation's Arts Grant starts today," she said, taking a sip of coffee. "I'm interviewing her this afternoon." After they had left the Eyrie, Amelia had thrown herself into finding a new purpose. She refused to be a billionaire's idle wife. With her background in art history, Ethan had suggested she could help shape the philanthropic work of the Vance Foundation. She had started at the bottom, as a volunteer, determined to prove her worth on her own merits. Her intelligence and passion, the very things Ethan had first fallen in love with, had quickly made her an invaluable part of the team. She was now heading a major new initiative to fund arts education in underprivileged schools. She was building something of her own. "Is that the one from the Public Arts Project in Detroit?" Ethan asked, sitting on the edge of the raised garden bed next to her. "The very one," Amelia said, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "She's brilliant. She has this incredible vision for—" She launched into a passionate explanation of the new director's work, and Ethan listened, a real, warm smile on his face. This was the woman he married. The fire was back in her mind, no longer clouded by insecurity or the poisonous whispers of so-called friends. Their journey had not been easy. Rebuilding trust was a slow, methodical process, much like building one of Ethan's complex structures. It required honesty, patience, and a willingness to confront the painful truths of their past. There had been difficult conversations, moments of doubt, and the quiet, hard work of forgiveness. But they had faced it together. The cracks in their foundation had been repaired, reinforced with a new, brutal honesty. Ethan reached out and gently wiped the smudge of dirt from her cheek. "You're happy," he said. It wasn't a question. "I am," she replied, her voice soft. "I've never been happier." She looked at their house, their garden, at the quiet life they were building, a life that was a fusion of his 2 worlds. "I finally realized that it was never about the money, rich or poor. It was about worth. I was measuring my own worth by the wrong standards, and I was letting other people measure yours." "We all make mistakes, Amelia," he said gently. "The important thing is to learn from them, to build better next time." He stood up and offered her a hand. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet, into his arms. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet of their garden, the past a scar that had healed into something strong, the future an open, sunlit blueprint waiting to be filled. True wealth, they had both learned, wasn't something you could count. It was something you built, together, with a foundation of love, respect, and unwavering integrity. This story is a powerful reminder that a person's value is not in their title or their bank account, but in their character. It teaches us that true strength is quiet dignity, and that respect is something to be earned through our actions, not demanded by our status. Amelia learned a difficult lesson, one that cost her dearly, but ultimately led her to a more authentic and fulfilling life. What do you think? Was Ethan right to hide his identity for so long? And what would you have done if you were in Amelia's shoes? We would love to read your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective is what makes this community so special. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content that explores the deepest corners of the human heart. Thank you for being here with us today. We'll see you in the next story.